And good evening, everyone, and welcome to Queeries. I'm Brian Kimmett, your host. And with me this evening, I have Matthew Nordsay-Jones. Did I pronounce that correctly,
Yes.
I hope?
Very good.
Awesome. And he's with a state organization called SPAN, which stands for the Single Payer Action Network. So we're talking healthcare this evening. Welcome, Matthew, and I guess we'll just get right into it. So in terms of people not knowing, and honestly speaking, I didn't even know this organization existed. What does SPAN, generally speaking, what is its goal?
Well, thank you so much for having me, first of all. So SPAN is we're an all-volunteer statewide organization that works for healthcare for all Ohioans, basically. We would like to see that every Ohioan, regardless of what they do, or where they work, or where they're from, be able to see the doctor when they need to see them. And so we work for basically a Medicare for all on a statewide level, although we would love to see a federal program if that is a possibility as well.
And just in terms of, because I know that when people start talking Medicare for all, the specter of socialism, and that's generally the specter that comes up the most, and
Sure.
that we're goose-stepping our way to communism. Have you found over time that more and more people, just in general, are in favor of a single-payer network?
Sure, yeah, without a doubt. So, we've been working on this for a number of years now, and I got to say that especially in the last 4 or 5 years, we have seen a huge change in people's knowledge about what single payer is or what Medicare for all is, as well as just the knowledge of how broken our current system is. So, unfortunately, people see this every day in their own families and in their own personal health care. And it becomes more and more an urgent need for everybody to be able to get the health care that they need. And we've also seen, as we talk to people, you bring up the socialist thing, but in reality, single payer is the fiscally conservative way to go for health care. We are spending twice as much as any other country per person, or any other developed country per person on health care, and that is just a humongous waste of money. SPAN actually did an economic impact study just about 2 years ago now, where a healthcare economist from the University of Massachusetts Amherst looked at Ohio and looked at the actual details and the numbers that it would cost to cover everyone in Ohio and different ways that we can do it. It's all available on our website at spanohio.org. But when they looked at it, we as a state waste $20 billion a year on healthcare cover, or on this healthcare system that we have right now, that doesn't even cover 700,000 Ohioans and leaves many more with underinsurance that they really can't use. So what we're advocating for is a system that uses the money that we spend towards healthcare efficiently, that gets rid of the huge amounts of bureaucracies that goes along with the current system, which is just wasting our money and not giving us the care we need.
Now, in terms of, let's say for the sake of argument that this somehow magically comes to fruition, yeah, and based on the makeup of the current Ohio legislature and the governor, not anytime soon.
Sure.
But let's imagine for a moment that it does. Does this particular plan, does it get rid of insurance companies?
So the short answer is not entirely. The longer answer is to some extent yes. So everyone will be covered under the Ohio healthcare plan, like I said, from birth to death. And so we won't need a lot of the health insurance coverage that we have right now. Now, there is some room, as we've seen in other countries that have universal health coverage, for private insurers on the margins for things that aren't covered by the state plan. But we want to make sure that this is a plan that covers all of the things that are essential for our health care. And so what we're talking about coverage at that point is for things that are cosmetic or things that aren't necessary. And so it doesn't leave very much room for private health insurance companies in the end. Also, because it's a state-based program, there's some details and weeds that we could get into, but things like Medicare on a federal level will still exist if we were to implement a state-based system. Now, those people in Ohio with Medicare would not need like the Medicare Advantage plans that you see, because they would be covered by the Ohio plan for that. They would also get coverage for things like medicine and hearing and dental, which unfortunately Medicare right now just leaves out, which is a crazy problem. And then we have a very big mixed massive systems in this state and in this country as a whole. So things like the VA would still exist, although again, veterans would be able to go to any doctor they want with their Ohio healthcare plan. but still get that the veteran-specific care that they need through the VA centers. Mm-hmm. So it actually helps us. It helps the veterans not have to hit those problematic lines that they do in the VA system. Things like TRICARE for active duty military would also still exist. So there are some places where there would still be private health insurance, but it would be a significantly less.
And I know that another big bone of contention in our current healthcare system is the fact that we pay the highest drug prices anywhere in the world, and I think it's Medicare Part D,
yes,
as far as that goes, but the government isn't allowed to basically negotiate for lower prices on drugs. So in terms of an Ohio state-based plan, would the state of Ohio then be in negotiations with drug manufacturers to lower the cost of prescriptions?
Yes, and that is one of the huge benefits of having something like this. So Ohio as a population is actually bigger than many European countries that have universal health coverage. They're also as big as the VA system as a whole, which negotiates for drug prices. And gets significantly less expensive drugs for their members than Ohioans in general do. So yeah, as a state, we would be able to negotiate for the millions of Ohioans to get drug prices that are much more reasonable. So we're not talking about making the drug companies go out of business here. We're talking about prices that are just within the realm of reasonableness, so that they can still make money, they can still develop new drugs. All of these things, drug companies would not sell, their drugs for less than they can afford to, and they still sell to all of these other countries in the world. They still make money off of these other countries, but we would be able to get things for a much more reasonable price. One of the things that always hits home for me on the drug side of things is that I'm a type 1 diabetic, so I've been on insulin for many decades, and it's one that's often brought up, and it's so people hear about it a lot, but it doesn't hurt to reinforce the fact that insulin, Humalog insulin, which was one of the first human analog quick-acting insulins, came out in the mid-90s, 95, and it was $25 a vial then. Mm-hmm. That same insulin, despite having 3 other drug companies that make the exact same thing, is now $200 a vial, and that makes no sense. No other product goes up in price over the 2.5 decades it's been out by an order of magnitude. Mm-hmm. We need to be able to have some way to rein in these drug prices, because it's one of the many places that we're just getting raked over the coals. Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think also one of the things that kind of disturbs me about sort of how our medical system is set up is that for all the glitz and glamour, for all of the super cool new MRIs, plus whatever is going to come down the pike, we like to talk about how the fact that we have a market-based system, it's working, and we have all of these fantastic options that are available for people when they get sick, and then when you try to go and use it, the insurance companies aren't actually going to pay for it. Mm-hmm. Or a new drug, they're going to label it as experimental, and people might have to choose between, just going ahead and dying, or going into poverty just to afford the medications that they're on. So I guess the whole point behind this is that the argument made by conservatives in general, is that we let the market decide. The market is the best at deciding, and we don't want the government coming between you and your doctor. But they aren't saying that you've got an insurance company that's coming between you and your doctor, and the insurance company gets to decide what they will and will not cover. So just in terms of, you said things would be more efficient. Is that just basically saying you're taking the business piece of it out, the free market, so to speak, to allow the medical environment itself sort of do its own thing?
So not really, I guess, is the short answer. The longer answer is that the place where we need choice in a medical system, the place that I want choice is where I get my medical care done, like which doctor I see, which hospital I go to. These are the things that are important to me as a healthcare consumer, and for that matter, I'm a primary care doctor in my normal life, and that's what's important to me as a provider for people, is that I'm able to get the care for them that they need. What we have right now, technically, is a choice over which health insurance companies pay for our health care. Mm-hmm. And most of us don't even have that choice, really, because I get my insurance from my job. I have no choice but to get the one company that they're able to contract with, and that's where most Americans are. So we don't really even have a choice in that. And once we get that insurance, we're told this is the hospital system you can go to. These are the doctors that are within network.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you said, these are the tests that we're willing to cover or not to cover. So we have no choice on that end of things. And it's really our insurance companies that are deciding these things. So the choice that we need, and the choice that a single payer or a Medicare for All system would give us, is the choice of any doctor, any hospital, the choice to actually get the care by the people that we trust and the places that we find are the best. And that's where I think we need the choice in the system that we don't have right now. Mm-hmm. We also, but we find within the system that we have right now, those inefficiencies are a lot of, well, there's many different levels, but one of the big ones is that, you know, hospitals like the ones here in Dayton, they end up having actually more billers than they have hospital beds because they have to deal with so many different insurance companies, mm-hmm. and amongst, even within one insurance company, so many different plans that no one has any idea what is covered. So, you know, as an office, like my office, we employ somebody whose most of their job is just talking with insurance companies and begging them to cover medicines or procedures that we think that the patient needs. And that is a tremendous waste of money. And that's not to say that everything would be covered in a single payer system, right? There's still mm-hmm. going to be like just like there is now, like you get the X-ray first and then you get the MRI or something, you know, like you don't jump to things that are just a waste of money. Right. You still have to go through, but you know what all of those steps are because you have one system where we've all agreed these are the important things, this is, you know, the way that it should work. And also, as a patient, you know where accountability lies. Mm-hmm. So right now, if I call, you know, the CEO of an insurance company, they're not going to listen to me right. when I'm pissed about what they won't cover, right? Occasionally, they'll listen to people when something goes viral on the internet, but mm-hmm. that is few and far between when it comes to all of the problems that people have with the system. But if we have a system that's accountable to the public, that's when we can actually start getting changes that we really need. Because we can say, hey, this isn't working for us. You're wasting our money here, or you're not covering something you should there. And we can make sure those changes happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think the other thing too that, kind of shocked me as well is that, here in the United States, we have a tendency to think that we're number one at everything. And yet when it comes to health outcomes, it's shocking, in terms of mm-hmm. like, mortality rates for birth mothers, and especially those yep. In communities of color. Our lifespan is actually considered shorter than a lot of European nations, Asian nations, that sort of thing. So it seems to me, it feels like we think we're number one, but what we're really number one at is thinking we're number one. So, so yeah. I don't, yeah. Would this then help in terms of overall health outcomes? Because again, you're taking the insurance companies out of this and mm-hmm. you're just using and applying common sense to what you're going to be doing from a procedural standpoint?
Exactly, and you're making sure that people can get that care when they need it. So, I mean, really the only thing we're number one at right now is money spending. Like we spend more money than any other country, but we get horrible health outcomes. Like you mentioned, the life expectancy is just the tip of the iceberg. And in the US, much worse than many other countries, like we see larger disparities in between the poor and the rich. We see larger disparities between minorities and Caucasian folk. Like across the board, not having access to care widens those disparities mm-hmm. and makes it worse. So, and that's the kind of the black and white picture. But there's even more gradation areas too. So even people who have insurance in the United States, it used to be that back in 2000, almost no one had deductibles that were greater than $1,000. As of 2010, over half of all plans had deductibles greater than $1,000. Mm-hmm. Right now, I don't even know what the numbers are, but they're ridiculous. Yeah. Like, my healthcare deductible is $5,000. So, like, that's what stops people from getting the care they need. And we look at things like ER copays, for example. Like I think for my plan, it's $300 or $400 right now to go to the ER. And the idea is that that's somehow supposed to cut down on care. If cost cut down on care, we wouldn't have people wasting any money at all in the States, but we do. And what it does is it stops people who, so it doesn't stop the person who's crazy from going to the ER, who thinks that they're dying, because they think they're dying whether there's a $300 copay or not. What it stops is the guy who's like, well, I'm having chest pain, maybe it's just heartburn, I don't really want to go there and be told I should take a Tums for $300, right? Yep. And so it stops that guy who's having a heart attack from going, and then he ends up getting much more expensive care after the fact, or dying, after the fact. And that's part of the reason why we spend so much of the money that we spend right now. And those are lives that could be saved and money that could be saved if we would just have a more efficient and reasonable system.
Well, and it also feels like, you know, rather than being proactive in medicine, we're more reactive. Again, probably based on what you just said, based on how everything is set up, that, you know, if you can't get someone in and start guiding them on everything from diet, exercise, that sort of thing, you know, catching it before anything bad really happens, you play all this catch up later on, to your point, when you've got people that aren't actually showing up until they're so sick that they're now going to need just a monstrous amount of care just to get them back to some point of normalcy, so to speak.
Exactly, and actually that's where we see a lot of interesting, I mean, bad, and by interesting I mean bad things, like when people are first coming onto Medicare at 65. A lot of spending is done right in the beginning because they haven't had care for so long that they suddenly jump into being like, all right, we have to get this, and we have to get this, and like you said, it's done oftentimes later than it should, or even too late, so that it costs us a lot more when we should have had people being able to go to primary care doctors early on, get the care that they need, get the preventative care that they need, so that we don't run into these problems later on.
Well, and I think also another thing, you know, and this is just, you know, as my brain is sort of remembering all this stuff I've, you know, read over the years on stuff like this. But one of the other areas where we spend an awful lot of money is at end of life, and that we spend so much money saying, okay, I want this particular procedure or this particular medication, and it's going to give me like 3 more months. That we really haven't had an adult conversation about end of life and what that should actually look like.
Yeah, and that is definitely one of those things that we as a country need to talk about, but also we as like individuals need to talk with our doctors about, because what we found actually in many studies over the years is that people who sit down and actually have that conversation with their primary care doctor that can say like, hey, this is what I want, you know, for my final years or days or months or whatever, they end up getting actually a lot less of that very expensive, not necessarily necessary care, because most of us don't want to die in a hospital, you know? Most of us want to be around our family, we want to be comfortable, but we don't always necessarily want all of those things done. And it's important that your family know this, it's important that your doctors know what you want, so that we can make sure that we all have, you know, the end of life that we want to have. But yeah, and that's one of the many other things. So single payer is not the end of fighting over important healthcare changes. You know, like we already mentioned a little bit, you know, health disparities are huge in this country, you know, for minority communities, for LGBT communities. Like, we have a lot of work to do as a medical community in general, and so it can't stop just with single payer either.
Well, and I guess the major question, or the big question I have now is, based again on the makeup of our state government, are you getting any traction whatsoever with, you know, those in power who can actually begin making this change, or is it kind of one of those where, yeah, we'll sit down, we'll talk to you, but as soon as you're out the door, we have already forgotten, or you know, or even worse, we'll just make fun of the notion that we're not going to go socialist?
Sure. So it's a mixed bag is the short answer. We certainly, again, just like with the public conversation, we've seen changes a lot over the last 5 or 6 years in our conversations with the politicians, both in Ohio and outside of Ohio. And there, although, you know, we are not, you're right, going to pass this year or next year, I do feel like we are moving in a direction. We had more co-sponsors 2 legislative sessions ago than we've ever had before, with 20 co-sponsors on a single payer bill in the Ohio House. Not enough to pass a 99-person House, but we're getting further, and we're having some really productive conversations with people that you wouldn't think, you know, with the further right side of the aisle, because they realize, again, the fiscal problems that we have both in Ohio and across the country with spending so much on healthcare. And we've really tried in the last 10 years a lot of the other ideas for how we fix the system. And we're seeing that although, you know, the ACA, Obamacare, certainly helped a lot of people, it did not solve the problems. You know, it didn't get us all the way there. And so I do think we're getting more traction. I think there's still a lot of politics around it. So even people who would agree in back rooms won't necessarily agree in front of the camera.
Sure.
But I do think as we continue to talk to people, we will get there eventually.
Excellent. And where can individuals go in order to get more information about SPAN and what it does, and in fact, what they can do to help?
Sure. Our website is span, S-P-A-N, ohio.org. You can get more information there. There's people across the state of Ohio. We have contact information there for the regional coordinators who can get you more involved with volunteering, obviously with donations, with coming to talk to politicians. We'd love to have you.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for sharing that information, and we'll be right back.
Hey, welcome to our continuing series of cooking segments here. I'm Rob Waldron, owner of Catering by Rob, and this is our chef, Chef Bailey McIntosh.
Hello.
Today we're going to show you how to make a really great snack. This is going to be a pulled barbecue chicken slider. And what we do, we add a little coleslaw on top and we put it on a pretzel bun. That gives it a really good kick. So we're going to start off by making a simple coleslaw. Chef Bailey will show you that.
Here's the coleslaw I already have. It's cut up. It's cabbage and carrots, and it's already been cut and ready. So just basically take a handful of that. You don't need a whole lot depending on how many sliders you're going to make. So I'll just put a little bit in here, and I will spoon in a little bit of coleslaw dressing. You can either grab a recipe offline, or you can buy coleslaw dressing of your choice at the store.
And they make several different dressings. They make, you can go to Kroger's, you can get their brand, you can get the Marzetti's brand, you can get the Pine Cub brand.
You can get Kraft.
Kraft, yep, so.
Or you can make your own. And I always like to season it up, a little bit of salt and pepper here. And just about everything that I make, I always put my special seasoning. It's
A little Bailey dust.
You'll see that a lot throughout our segments here. Okay. And then once that's ready, that's the first thing I like to do, because I like to give it enough time so that some of the dressing can soak into the cabbage and the carrots, and so it'll give it a really good flavor.
Okay.
So we'll do that and set that aside.
Right. So the next thing we're going to do the chicken. Actually, the chicken takes a little bit of time, probably about 6 hours, because what you want to do, you want to cook it so well that it just falls apart. So basically, in a crock pot, usually the night before, I just lay out the chicken breast. We turn the crock pot on high for a few hours, and we just let the chicken cook after we season it up and everything. And oh yes, we use the Bailey dust on the chicken also. So basically, now we have the chicken breast. It's already been cooked. So now we're just going to throw it in this bowl here, and we're going to shred it. And basically, by shredding it, we take 2 forks, and we just pull it apart. And we just keep pulling it apart till it comes apart in little strings of chicken. And there we go. If I was at home, I'd be swirling this with my fingers, but since, we want to show you the right way to do it. So after we have the chicken all shredded up, and we'll show you a little bit of that. This chicken's all shredded here. We want to add barbecue sauce. Now again, there are lots of barbecue sauces out there. From Sweet Baby Ray's to the generic brands to our personal favorite, Montgomery Inn. So we just take some of that, and we'll just put some barbecue sauce in there.
Or of course, you can make your own. And
right. Brown sugar and
we
all
always
that.
like to doctor it up a little bit anyways, regardless of what kind we get.
A little Bailey dust in there, a little salt and pepper, just to give it a little kick. And we're just going to keep mixing this up.
And while he's mixing that, we take a pretzel bun, and it's really like a roll, so it's not necessarily a bun. So what we do is we just cut them in half, just like so, pretty even.
Now you got a little slider bun.
And then now you have a little slider bun.
I think we're going to need a little bit more barbecue sauce here.
You can never go wrong with too much barbecue sauce.
One of the things I like to do with my barbecue sauce, believe it or not, a little Coca-Cola and brown sugar gives it a great kick.
Or you can add a little bit of hot sauce to it if you want it to be spicy.
Little hot sauce.
Oh, red pepper flakes, depending on what you like. You season it up the way you want.
So now we have that. Now we're going to grab a plate, and I guess we can put a couple of these buns on there. We'll just do the bottoms first. How's that?
Lay out the bottoms on the plate.
Let's get this out of the way. And we're going to scoop the barbecue sauce right on there. Or the pulled chicken, I should say.
Make sure you put a nice amount of chicken on there so you get the the flavor.
Yeah, the one thing you don't want is a lot of bread.
Right.
So the more meat,
You don't
hide
want
the
to.
bread.
Right. You definitely don't want to overpower the chicken because that is the star. The protein, in my opinion, is always going to be the star. So you want to make sure that there is enough on there. That looks great.
Yeah, that's good.
That looks great.
Okay, so now we've done that. We've got the chicken on there.
And what I like to do is you can either take the top bun or you can just pile it right on top of the chicken. And I use that as kind of a scoop
There you go.
to put that on there.
Here's the other one. There you go. Now we've done some variations with this. You know, the health conscious, they love that kale that's going around now. They can make an awesome kale slaw. Give it some Asian flavors. So now you have the barbecue sauce, the sweet, and the Asian flavors of the kale slaw.
And with the kale slaw, I usually use a type of like a poppy seed vinaigrette dressing to mix that with, and I add some, you know, sesame seeds and crunch to it.
And to add a little bit little healthiness here, instead of regular potato chips, we're using some sweet potato chips as our little garnish and something to there. And there you have it. There is a barbecued chicken, pulled chicken slider on a pretzel bun. Let's taste this first.
Okay,
Here we go.
here we go.
Oh, that's good. That's real good. We'll see you next time.
And welcome back. And again, I'd like to thank you, Matthew, for being on the show and talking about SPAN with us. It's certainly an important topic. Once again, what is that website that people can go to in order to get more information?
It's SPAN, S-P-A-N, ohio.org.
Excellent. Make sure you go out and check that out because it really is an important issue, as you know, COVID has actually shown. And we look forward to seeing you next week.